Revealed, the sinister government cover-up I discovered as a private investigator haunted secrets. Jessica stumbled through the shadows of her quiet Ohio neighborhood, her heart racing. For weeks, a chilling wave of disappearances had swept through her once tranquil town. Friends and neighbors vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but whispers of dread and the growing suspicion that something far more sinister was at play. The air felt thick with unease, the kind that gripped you with cold fingers around your throat. She could almost hear their screams even in silence. At first, she brushed it off. Just a byproduct of too many late-night cups of coffee and an overactive imagination. But as Max's innocent laughter faded into restless dreams, the chilling concept of the Watcher haunted her thoughts. The kids spoke in hushed tones, their little voices shivering with fear as they shared tales of flickering lights in the abandoned farm fields that skirted the town's borders. What could lie in those dark corners? Terror surged through her as she considered the implications. Amidst the chatter of the neighborhood, strange things stirred. Jessica noticed her friends growing pale, smiles stretched thin as if something unseen gnawed at the edges of their lives. And then, as she dug deeper, her stomach churned with the realization that the local government had a secret, a fateful connection to the missing residents. What weren't they saying? Why was nobody speaking up? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The night Max awoke screaming from nightmares, cold sweat glistening on his brow, was the night she knew. She had to act. Together, they crept into what remained of the old school. Their once hallowed ground now lay crumbled in disrepair, haunted by memories of laughter that echoed like a ghostly taunt. As Jessica walked through the dimly lit hallways, an effacement of hope settled in her gut. The air was thick, oppressive, a sinister vibe wrapping around her like a serpent. Every creak of the floorboards beneath her feet resonated in her chest, while shadows danced on the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes. And just when she thought she was alone, a figure lurked behind the shadows. A breathless gasp escaped her lips as she recognized a familiar face. Her best friend, Anna. What was she doing here? A moment of disbelief rippled through her as she tried to reconcile the damage done to their bond. But Anna's gaze held a haunted look, full of silent terror. Suddenly, the truth punched Jessica square in the gut. Everything she stood for was threatened, and the very fabric of trust was unspooling at her fingertips. What had Anna gotten herself involved in? As she backed away, the silence of the school swallowed her whole, the weight of the mystery crushing down like a steel lid. Each desperate heartbeat filled her with dread. Did friends become enemies when dangerous secrets loomed? As darkness closed in, she clutched Max's hand tighter, the pulse of despair thrumming in her ears. The night wasn't through with her yet. The sound of rustling leaves echoed like a warning. Was the Watcher out there, lying in wait? Or was it someone she once thought she knew, a hidden threat lurking in plain sight? Snow began to swirl outside, whispering promises of impending doom as she realized she was never truly alone. Shadows came alive, and with them, the truth began to unravel, leaving only danger and the terrifying question, could she keep Max safe from the very monsters that haunted their own backyards? Jessica's heart thundered in her chest, echoing the ominous silence that enveloped the crumbling school. Anna stood frozen, her eyes darting to the shadows that seemed to twist with a life of their own. Max squeezed Jessica's hand tighter, sensing the palpable fear that filled the air. "Mom?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "Should?" Jessica hissed, urging him to remain still. She scanned the darkened hallway, the faint light from the moon filtering through broken windows casting eerie patterns on the ground. "What are you doing here, Anna?" Anna took a shaky breath before speaking, her voice barely a whisper. "I had to come. I found something they don't want anyone to see." Her eyes darted again, as if expecting something to leap out from the shadows at any moment. "What did you find?" Jessica pressed, dread pooling in her stomach. "Something that connects all the disappearances." Anna leaned closer, urgency fueling her words. "It's happening in the fields. They're taking people there, and the government knows." Jessica's blood ran cold. The knowledge that the government had a hand in this made her feel sick.
We need to leave. Now.
Before they notice we're here.
No.
Anna's voice cracked, desperation spilling into her posture.
You don't understand. We can't just leave without knowing the truth. If we do, how many more will disappear? How many are already lost? Every instinct screamed for her to flee, to get Max to safety. But the conviction in Anna's eyes sparked a flicker of resolve within her.
Okay, she finally said, her voice steady.
Show me.
They weaved through the dark halls, the air suffocating with the scent of rot and decay. Jessica clutched Max's hand like a lifeline, the weight of their situation forcing her heart to race even faster. Each step brought the flickers of cruel laughter and whispers closer, wrapping around her ankles like chains threatening to pull her down, and then they reached a door, barred and old, standing defiantly at the end of the hall. The sound of something unsettling echoed from beyond, a low murmur that sent shivers racing down Jessica's spine. Anna stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for the handle.
This is it, she breathed. I can feel it. We have to see. No, we can't.
Jessica protested, her voice rising in panic. Before she could pull Anna back, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with remnants of lives once lived, pictures, clothes, and a single flickering bulb that swung like a pendulum.
Look!
Anna gasped, stepping inside, her footfall echoing ominously.
Max tugged at Jessica, his small frame trembling. Mom, I don't like this, but she didn't have a choice. Max needed her to be strong.
So she stepped in, the floorboards groaning under the weight of dread pooling around her. Then she saw it. A jagged line of images on a wall, hastily pinned together.
Faces.
Faces of the missing people, including some of her own friends. The room spun, reality slipping like sand through her fingers.
Anna's voice was fraught with disbelief as she pointed to a date circled in red, tomorrow.
Let us get out. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper, but the foreboding weight of the night began to press down harder. Suddenly, the overhead light flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness for a heartbeat. When it flicked back on, she felt the breath leave her lungs. In the doorway stood a silhouette, the outline too still, too menacing.
Where do you think you're going?
It growled, as shadows lengthened and began to close in around them.
Jessica's heart raced.
She turned to Max, their eyes locking in shared terror.
Run!
She shouted, fear propelling her into motion, but the icy grip of the night's terror tightened around them, and one question echoed in her mind: could they escape the darkness that now threatened to swallow them whole?
Jessica's instincts kicked in, her body moving before her mind could catch up. She pulled Max close, ready to bolt, but Anna hesitated, eyes locked onto the figure in the doorway. Anna, come on!
Jessica urged, panic lacing her voice. But Anna stepped forward instead, defiance sparking in her eyes.
I need to know who you are. The silhouette shifted slightly, revealing a face half illuminated by the dim light.
It was not a stranger. Jessica recognized him. Mr. Graves, she gasped, memories colliding in her head with a heavy thud. The science teacher known for bizarre theories about disappearances, his obsession veiled behind documentaries and fervent discussions.
What are you doing here?
She stumbled, confusion racing alongside terror. Mr. Graves smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes.
You shouldn't be here, Jessica. The truth isn't what you think it is.
He stepped forward, leaving the shadows. In the flickering light, his demeanor shifted, a predatory glint flickering deep within him.
I've been watching all of you. Always asking questions. It's time you stopped.
Jessica's heart pounded, primal fear flooding her veins as she felt the cold sweat gather at her brow. Mom, please, Max whimpered, his small hand tightening around hers. Before Jessica could reply, Graves raised his hand slightly, a gesture that suddenly felt sinister. You can all be part of something much greater, he intoned, his voice now soothingly menacing. If you just cooperate, so many lives can be saved.
No! Jessica snapped, shock fueling her defiance. You're the one who's behind this, aren't you?
Graves chuckled lightly, shaking his head as he took another step forward, and shadows crept closer from behind him.
Behind?
Oh,
That is too simple. I'm merely a facilitator of the inevitable.
Suddenly the ground rumbled beneath them, shaking the dusty remnants on the floor. The light from the bulb flickered wildly again, the shadows warping as they seemed to grow teeth and claws.
Jessica felt Max's breath hitch, a fragile, terrified gasp. "Run!"
Jessica screamed again, her voice tearing through the chaotic air. She yanked Max, pushing past Anna, who was still gawking at Graves.
Jessica felt a moment of desperation when she looked back. Was Anna really willing to listen to the man they feared most? "Anna, please!"
she called out, but the room swirled in panic, her emotions a whirlwind of dread and urgency. As they raced back down the hall, every creak of the floorboards behind them echoed like the footsteps of a hungry predator. Jessica barely breathed, her legs pounding against the stubborn floor as they rounded corners and nearly collided into walls.
"Where do we go?" Max's voice pierced through the wet blanket of fear enveloping them. "We need to find a way out."
Jessica gasped, forcing her legs to move faster. The smell of decay thickened, pulling her spirit down. They reached the staircase, the only way to escape, but it loomed before them like the gullet of a vast beast. Jessica reached for the railing when an icy wind rushed past them, snuffing out the flickering light behind them. The shadows behind them groaned and shifted, the echoes of laughter rising to a fever pitch. Just then, the floor shook again, and she caught a glimpse of something in the corner of her eye, a faded photograph on the wall, the final flicker of light illuminating it. Jessica froze, dread creeping back in like a thick fog. It was a picture of a group, hands raised in jubilation, but one face was circled in red: Max's best friend, Gary. "No," she whispered, her heart sinking further.
"This can't be real."
A laugh echoed behind her, and in that instant, she realized they weren't just here to witness a government cover-up. They were part of it. The heavy darkness grew, swallowing her voice. She grabbed Max's hand and pulled him into the stairwell, determination igniting within her chest. But just as they took their first steps down, the door slammed shut behind them, sealing their fate. Jessica's heart raced as she turned to face the looming darkness below.
"Is this it?" she thought, feeling the creeping dread. Not in her stomach, but they had to keep moving. Keep running. What sinister truth awaited them in the depths of this haunted school? And who else was watching from the shadows? Jessica gripped Max's hand tightly as they descended into darkness. The stairwell was damp, the air thick with the musty scent of mold and decay. Each step felt like a trial, a push against the heaviness that clung to their skin. "Mom, what is happening?" Max's voice broke through the oppressive silence, quaking with fear.
"I don't know, sweetie," she whispered, trying to shield him from the fear bubbling in her chest.
"But we need to keep moving."
The further they went, the more the shadows seemed to coalesce, wrapping around them like a living shroud. A shiver crawled down Jessica's spine, the sensation of being watched prickling her skin. She glanced back up the staircase. The door remained shut, but the air around them crackled with an unseen menace. Then came the sound that sent a fresh wave of terror through her, soft, steady footsteps echoing from below. She leaned closer to Max, her body becoming a protective barrier.
"Where was Anna? Maybe we should go back?"
Max suggested hesitantly, his eyes wide with rising dread. "No," Jessica replied sharply, fear sharpening her resolve.
"We can't go back. We have to find a way out."
They reached the bottom of the stairs, where a long corridor stretched before them, paint peeling, lights flickering sporadically. The glow was sickly, casting strange shadows that danced along the walls. A part of Jessica wanted to turn and flee back to the dreadful comfort of the stairs, but she swallowed her fear and stepped forward.
"Stay close," she commanded.
They tiptoed down the corridor, the air growing colder with each passing second. Suddenly, a voice echoed off the walls, a garbled whisper that sent chills racing through Jessica's body. "Join us," it murmured, barely audible over the pounding of her heart.
Max squeezed her hand tighter. "Did you hear that?"
"Yes," she admitted, dread creeping into her voice.
"But we need to keep going."
The corridor twisted unexpectedly, leading them to an open space, a gymnasium perhaps. The wooden floor gleamed under the faint light, but as they stepped into the room, the lights flickered out completely. Darkness enveloped them, swallowing any trace of familiarity.
Jessica fumbled for her phone, the screen lighting up like a tiny beacon. "Mom!"
Max cried, panic rising in his voice.
"Right here," she replied, voice trembling.
When the screen glinted back at her, she saw a figure silhouetted against the far wall, a slender shape with a tilted head, watching them.
"Who's there?"
she called, trying to sound brave. The figure stepped closer, and the faint light illuminated a familiar face, Anna. Her eyes were wide, mouth partially open, as if she were gasping for breath.
"Jessica! You have to run. He knows you're here." Max pressed against Jessica's leg, his little body shaking. "What does she mean?"
Before Anna could reply, something slammed against the door at the far end of the gym, rattling the hinges. Jessica felt her stomach drop as the sound rippled through the air.
"Run!"
Anna screamed, her voice slicing through the terror. Without hesitation, Jessica grabbed Max's hand again and dashed toward the opposite end of the room. They tore past old bleachers, the wood creaking ominously beneath their weight.
Each footfall echoed, a countdown to whatever horror was lurking behind them.
As they neared a door leading out, a terrible commotion erupted behind them, the sound of something heavy hitting the floor, followed by maniacal laughter that twisted her gut.
They burst through the door, into another dark hallway, but there was an eerie calm here, nothing but silence, save for their gasping breaths. "Where do we go now?"
Max whimpered, but before Jessica could answer, she spotted something glimmering on the floor. She bent down, her heart racing as she reached for it, a key, cold and metallic. Icy fingers of intuition gripped her.
This could open something. But what? And for whom?
The laughter roared behind them again, a mocking reminder of their dread.
What door could the key unlock? And what awaited them inside?
Jessica's breath hitched as the laughter echoed again, chilling her to the bone. It resonated in her chest, filling her with an inexplicable sense of dread.
Forget the key, where was the exit?
Mom Max's voice trembled, his small hand turning clammy in her grip.
"I don't like this, I want to go home."
"We will, Max. I promise," Jessica replied, forcing a smile, even though her heart raced with mounting fear. They had to find a way out, and fast. The hallway stretched on, an unending tunnel of shadows. Lights flickered above their heads, casting brief, distorted images along the walls. Any moment now, she feared something would emerge from the darkness. She glanced down at the key again, desperate for answers.
What did it belong to?
"Let us move," she urged, pulling Max along.
"Stick close to me."
As they hurried down the dimly lit corridor, the air thickened with a sense of impending doom. Each step felt heavier, as if the very ground beneath them wanted to keep them trapped. The walls closed in, and Jessica fought against an overwhelming sensation of claustrophobia.
"Mom, what if we don't find a way out?" Max asked, his voice quaking.
"We will," she assured him again, her voice barely above a whisper. It felt like a promise she was struggling to keep. Suddenly, a door to their right creaked open, a sliver of dim light spilling out. Jessica hesitated, the urge to keep moving battled against the flicker of hope the door offered.
"Should we check there?"
she asked, but deep down, she feared what might await them inside.
"Yes, maybe it's a way out,"
Max urged, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. Jessica swallowed hard.
"Okay, but be quiet."
They moved toward the door, the key heavy in her pocket. She gently pushed it open, the rusted hinges protesting loudly. The room inside was dim, the air stale as dust motes danced in the faint light. As they stepped in, the floorboards creaked beneath their feet. They were in a small office, old files strewn about in disarray. A fading poster on the wall read, "Safety above all." The irony of it gnawed at her stomach.
"Look!"
Max pointed, his voice urgently subdued, to a file cabinet shoved into the corner.
"What's in there?"
Jessica approached cautiously, her heart racing. She pulled open a drawer, revealing more documents, handwritten notes, photographs, the faces of people she didn't recognize but who wore expressions of fear and panic. She rifled through the papers, her hands trembling. One page caught her eye. It was marked with a big red stamp, "Classified."
Alarm bells rang in her mind.
What kind of secrets were held here? The sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway behind them, a slow, deliberate advance.
A swath of darkness loomed at the entrance, blocking their only escape.
Mom Max's voice was barely a whisper, terror etched across his small face. They were trapped. The file cabinet suddenly felt like a flimsy shield against whatever was coming.
Jessica's pulse quickened.
The key in her pocket could either keep them safe or seal their fate.
Over there.
Max pointed to a door at the back of the room, barely visible in the shadows.
We have to try that. No time to waste. Jessica snapped, pushing her fear aside.
She centered her focus. As she reached for the doorknob, the footsteps stopped just outside their door. With a deep breath, she twisted the knob and swung it open, revealing another dark corridor beyond.
Go! She commanded, shoving Max ahead of her.
But just as the door began to close, a figure stepped inside. Silhouetted against the dim light. It was a tall, gaunt figure, its eyes gleaming with a predatory intensity, a smile creeping across its pale lips.
Did you think you could escape? It whispered. Jessica's heart threatened to burst. What had they stumbled into? With a rush of adrenaline, she flung herself and Max into the corridor, sprinting into the unknown. Behind them, the figure let out a chilling laugh, echoing in the darkness. Run! She shouted again, but this time, more desperate. What were they running from, and could they ever find safety?
They pelted down the corridor, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the oppressive darkness around them. Each heartbeat throbbed painfully in Jessica's ears, drowning out the remnants of that horrible laughter. Max struggled to keep pace, his tiny legs unable to match her frantic speed.
Mom, please. I'm scared. Max's voice was a high-pitched wail, slicing through the air like a siren.
She glanced back. The figure was gone, but that only added to the dread, as if it were lurking just out of sight.
Keep going,
Jessica urged, panic gripping her tightly. The walls pressed closer, and the air felt thinner, almost suffocating. The corridor branched off to the left and right, and Jessica skidded to a halt, her eyes darting for options. Fear screamed that she should move, but confusion halted her.
Which way? Mom Max panted, close to tears. Which way do we go? I don't know. Just we need to hide.
She spotted a doorway to the left, its cracked frame half hidden by shadow.
Jessica grabbed Max's hand and yanked him in that direction.
Inside, the room was drenched in darkness, the only illumination from the occasional flicker of dying light bulbs overhead. It smelled damp, like old, forgotten places. As they stepped inside, Jessica pressed her back against the wall, trying to calm their breathing. Just for a moment, she whispered, glancing toward the door they had come through. It creaked loudly as it swung slightly.
Mom, what if it finds us?
Max asked, his voice breaking. Shush, she whispered urgently, holding a finger to her lips. Then she heard a soft shuffle outside the door, like the scrape of footsteps against the cold, hard floor. Terror washed over her. Max, stay close, she commanded, flattening against the wall. The sounds grew louder, closer, each step sending ice-cold fingers crawling up her spine. She looked around desperately, but all she saw were shadows, a heap of old crates, a rusted filing cabinet, and a large, dark shape in the corner. With a gnawing instinct, Jessica moved toward the shape. It was an old, hulking cabinet, its doors slightly ajar. She hesitated, but instinct told her it could provide a hiding spot.
Get in, Max. What if it's not safe?
Max whimpered, peering into the darkness of the cabinet.
It's better than being seen.
Trust me. She urged him inside and then squeezed in after him, shutting the doors just enough to create a tiny crack for light. As they huddled together, the world shrank down to the sound of their frantic breaths and the horrible crunch of footsteps drawing closer. Max's fingers clutched her hand, the warmth slowly slipping away as fear gripped him tighter.
Ghostly whispers filled the air, threaded with a seriousness that made every muscle in Jessica's body tense. Did you hear that?
A voice said from outside.
Jessica's heart stopped.
They went this way, another voice replied, sending cold shivers down her spine.
Search everywhere. They can't escape. A pause followed, heavy and suffocating. Jessica squeezed Max's hand, praying they stayed undetected. The weight of that terrible laughter echoed again in her mind, a taunting reminder of the nightmare they were caught in. "Why are they looking for us?" Max's voice was tiny. "I don't know, sweetheart," she whispered, trembling with fear. "But we have to be silent. We can't let them find us." The voices continued, growing more animated, searching the nearby room. Frustration and desperation mixed in the air, thickening it with tension. Jessica felt the sweat bead on her forehead, the fear morphing into a raw, primal instinct to survive. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the hallway, shaking the door of their hiding spot. "They're in here!" Her heart raced wildly. They were onto them. Jessica's mind raced. They had to get out, but there was nowhere to run. The voices drew closer, a sinister promise of confrontation hanging over them. "Mom, what if they'd shoo?" She silenced him. The door next to them creaked open, and the beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness. The figure from before, now clearer, loomed into view, eyes like sharp knives. Glinting in the light, the beam swept the room, pausing just inches from the cabinet. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. Would they be found? "Where are you?" The figure whispered with a chilling smile, the thrill of the hunt evident in its tone. Jessica clutched Max closer, fearing the moment the light would reveal them. What awaited them if they were discovered? Would they find safety, or was this nightmare only beginning? "Please," she whispered to herself, her heart racing as the footsteps drew nearer again. The light flickered, creaking gloomily as it swept across the room, illuminating the remnants of a past that felt both distant and haunting. Jessica's heart hammered in her chest, each beat echoing the terror of impending discovery. She could feel Max trembling against her, barely able to contain a whimper. "Where are you?" echoed through the silence, a taunt laced with malice. The figure leaned closer, the flashlight beam cutting through darkness like a blade. Jessica fought the overwhelming urge to move, to scream, to do anything other than remain hidden. What if they found them? Suddenly, the flashlight beam settled on the old cabinet. Jessica's breath hitched. The light waned, shaken as the figure stepped back. "They have to be here," the voice trailed off, echoing faintly in the oppressive darkness. Jessica squeezed Max tightly, their breaths intermingling into one desperate rhythm. Then, as if sensing their fear, the figure turned away. The voices outside grew distant, replaced by hushed murmurs and scuffling feet that echoed in a chaotic chorus of dread. Each sound echoed through Jessica's mind, warping it. "Stay still, Max," she insisted between clenched teeth. The cabinet felt like a tomb, air thick with the smell of rust and decay. "How long do we have to stay here?" Max whispered, his voice shaking, full of the innocent confusion of childhood caught in a nightmare. "I don't know," Jessica breathed, her mind racing. Every instinct told her to flee, to burst out of their hiding spot and run, but what awaited them out there could be far worse than the terror inside the cabinet. Her heart swelled with a maternal instinct. She could not let anything happen to Max. Time crawled, each second stretching into eternity. The voices began to fade, leaving behind an unsettling silence. But just as hope sparked, a chilling laugh sliced through the air, striking at the core of her resolve. The hunt was not over. The cabinet door rattled suddenly, making her jump. Jessica felt the pressure of terror squeeze her chest as the voice returned, soft yet gritty, hungry. "I'll find you. I always find you." Suddenly, the door burst open, sending the metallic clatter echoing through the room. Light flooded in, harsh and blinding, illuminating every shadow. Jessica instinctively covered Max's mouth, her eyes wide with fear. But then, they were met not by the menace from before, but by an assortment of figures in dark uniforms, their expressions cold, mechanical. "We know you're in here," one snapped, scanning the room with an unsettling calmness that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. Jessica's brain churned. They weren't seeking safety, they were hunting. "Get out!" A voice barked, and there was panic instead of chill laughter. It wasn't her and Max they sought after. As the officers surged into the room, carrying out their orders with chilling efficiency, their eyes roving over the clutter, Jessica caught sight of something small and glimmering on the floor, a strange object half buried in dust. Something that didn't belong in this forsaken place. The officers were closing in. "We won't let them escape!" They shouted,
but their focus shifted. Jessica's heart raced as the nearest officer bent down, grasping the strange object.
What was it? Why did it have that glow?
Her instincts screamed to act.
Max!
She whispered sharply.
We need to move now.
But as they edged toward the door, the figure, still cloaked in shadows but standing ominously at the entrance, turned to face them, a cruel smirk breaking the darkness.
You can't run.
You're part of this now. The words hung in the air, wrapping around Jessica and Max like chains. Desperation coursed through Jessica's veins, stoking the fire of her fear.
Mom, I'm scared. Max's voice trembled, and panic twisted in Jessica's gut.
Just trust me, she replied, scanning for an escape.
They had to get out of there. But escape wasn't enough.
They needed answers, and answers might lead them to something much darker than themselves. The doorway loomed ahead, but the figure remained.
What secrets lay beyond? What did they uncover here? Would they escape or face an even greater terror? Mom, run!
Max shouted as the figure lunged, sending Jessica reeling back into the dark.
What revelation awaited them at the end of this horror? Would they uncover the truth, or had they already entered the depths of darkness from which there was no return? Jessica's instincts kicked in, propelling her into motion as the figure lunged.
She grasped Max tightly, forcing herself to calm the frantic breath escaping her lips.
Their refuge transformed into a zone of chaos, where shadows flickered, and unseen eyes absorbed every heartbeat. Go!
She urged him, her voice barely a whisper. In that moment, a glimmer of hope punctured the veil of despair around them.
They could leap into the hallway.
If they could just reach the stairs yet. As they darted toward the doorway, the officer at the entrance blocked their path, his unwavering gaze cutting through the frantic energy that enveloped them.
Not so fast! He shouted.
Max's small hand slipped from Jessica's grasp as he skirted past her, pushing forward with a determination that startled her. In a flash, she pivoted to pull him back.
Stay close.
But before they could do more than share a terrified glance, the shadowed figure stepped forward, its eyes gleaming with a dark delight.
You think you can escape so easily?
The voice seemed to twist and eddy around them, darkness wrapping around their minds like a vice. Jessica's heart slammed against her ribcage.
Panic ignited inside her.
They weren't just hunting them, they were playing a game. It was clear to her now the rules were cruel, and the stakes were unimaginably high.
Mom!
Max's shout sliced through the tension.
Over there!
He pointed to an abandoned doorway at the end of the hall, its sinister wood weathered and half gone. Without waiting for instructions, he surged forward, leaving Jessica momentarily paralyzed by fear.
Max!
She screamed, tearing after him as her resolve crystallized into determination. They had to hide again, regroup, figure out their next move, but the figure followed them, a darkness that swept down the hallway. They could feel its malevolent presence, suffocating and relentless, as though it were a living entity hungry to consume them whole. Jessica could almost hear the whispers of torment lurking in the shadows, deep and resonating with the cries of others who might be inhabited this space before them. As they reached the doorway, a cacophony of voices erupted behind them, officers commanding, ordering. The urgency of their pursuit filled the air with a thick weight. Jessica swept Max inside, the darkness swallowing them as she shoved the door closed, gasping for breath. This room was cluttered with ancient furniture, shrouded in dust and memories. The air felt heavy, as if time itself refused to escape. She dared a glance around. A small window at the far end offered a sliver of pale light, illuminating dust motes dancing like ghosts. Stay quiet, she urged Max, who nodded, wide-eyed.
Jessica felt the walls closing in, a pressure building around them. Outside, footsteps thudded against the floorboards. The officers were canvassing like wolves, searching for their prey. Check every corner.
One of them barked, their voices mingling with the horrors lurking in the darkened recesses of the room. Then she spotted it a glimmer beneath a broken chair. The strange object, glowing faintly, a magnetic pull tugged at her heart. It felt wrong yet inviting.
Max, stay here.
She whispered, crawling toward it.
Mom, no.
Max's frightened plea echoed softly in the confines of the room, but she ignored him, feeling drawn to the light.
Outside, the officers began to bang on doors. "They're coming!"
As if an answer to her unspoken fear, the glowing object pulsed, drawing her in closer. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of sorrow and loss. But just as her fingers grazed its cold surface, the door crashed open. Startled, she spun, facing the officers, eyes wide with shock.
"Found you!"
They shouted, their smug expressions morphing into rage, cutting off any chance of escape. The swirling darkness behind them deepened, leaving Jessica hollow with dread.
Had she uncovered something wicked? Was the object a beacon meant to trap them?
In that moment of tangled choices and racing thoughts, Jessica froze.
Everything hung on a razor's edge.
Then, she heard it again, a faint whisper from the
object. "Help me. Help us." What was this thing? Who was it calling for?
Its mystery loomed heavier than the threat outside. Jessica felt the weight of destiny shift in her hands. As the officers approached, their faces twisted with malice, she hesitated.
Could this be their salvation or their doom? "Max, we have to move,"
she shouted, yet the pulsing light captured their attention, just as the officers closed in.
What awaited them? Would they become part of a dark legacy? The door splintered against the force of their urgency, and Jessica could only wonder, was there still a chance to escape the darkness unraveling around them? Or had they fallen into a trap from which escape was impossible?
The officers swarmed forward, their shadows elongating and twisting in the dim light as they closed the distance.
Jessica's heartbeat roared in her ears, drowning out the frantic whispers from the object. She felt like a cornered animal, trapped and desperate, its glare holding her captive. "Get away from her!"
Max cried, his voice piercing through the chaos. Jessica's heart twisted at her son's bravery, even as the terror coiled tighter around them.
"Stay behind me!" she shouted, adrenaline giving each word an electric charge.
They had to find a way out. This place was no sanctuary, it was a prison. The officers lunged. Jessica, fueled by pure instinct, darted sideways, her fingers brushing against the glowing object just before she turned, yanking Max with her. The force of its pull yanked her back, but she fought against it, clenching her jaw, pushing forward. Outside the chaos, a voice rose above the rest, icy and authoritative.
"We need to secure the area. This isn't just about them anymore."
That voice, Jessica recognized it. It was the officer who had first blocked their escape.
"Mom!" Max tugged on her sleeve. "What's happening?" "They're gonna get us." "Not if we can help it."
Desperation fueled her as she pushed through broken furniture and debris, her heart racing not just for her own life but for the little boy beside her. Suddenly, a heavy hand gripped her shoulder, yanking her back. She stumbled, the cold fluorescence of the object casting long shadows across her frightened face. The officer's eyes glinted with fervor, as if he could sense the power radiating from the source.
"Let me go!"
she screamed, struggling against his hold, panic clawing its way through her throat. "No can do," he hissed, his breath hot against her skin. "You're in deep, and I can't let you interfere." In that moment, the object's light intensified, filling the room with an eerie brilliance that made the officers recoil, their expressions transforming from anger to fear.
"Mom! The light!" Max shouted, his wide eyes reflecting the peculiar glow. It's changing." Jessica seized the chance. "Max, we need to get to that window," she cried, pointing to the small sliver that now pulsed rhythmically with the object. She could feel the urgency of their predicament shift, a kaleidoscope of choices opening in the air around them. With a heave, she broke free, pushing past the stunned officer, her feet pounding against the warped floor. She clutched Max tight, guiding him toward the flickering light as shouts erupted behind them. "Stop! You can't escape!" The voices of the officers thundered through the room, but Jessica couldn't look back. The energy from the object felt alive, pulling her closer to the window. The air thickened as they approached, and with each step, she felt more and more determined. Sweat trickled down her spine, but she pressed on, the glowing beacon lighting their path to freedom. As they reached the window, she fumbled with the latch, her fingers trembling as she struggled to open it. It creaked, the sound echoing ominously.
The glowing object pulsed again, a rhythm now matching her heartbeat. Then came a loud crash. Another officer stormed through the door, eyes wide with frenzy.
"Get them!"
He roared, but as he did, the light exploded in a blinding flash.
Jessica squinted, stunned as the illumination enveloped them like a blanket, pushing the night back. "Mom! What's happening?"
Max cried, his small voice a tether to her frantic focus. She turned her eyes toward him, terror and confusion intertwining. "I don't know, but we have to trust him." Just like that, a scream pierced through the chaos, a blood-curdling sound emanating from the figure of the officer, now backward, twisting away from the light. With courage ignited, Jessica flung the window open, the night air rushing in like the breath of a new beginning. She felt weightless as they leaped toward it, the fear of being caught giving way to the flicker of hope. But as they dove into the darkness outside, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she unleashed, it was far from over. What
would this mysterious power reveal about the past? And how far would the darkness follow them into the night?
As they barreled through the open window, Jessica felt the rush of cold air against her skin, a stark contrast to the suffocating dread inside. She landed on the ground with a thud, Max tumbling after her, and they both skidded across the dew-kissed grass. The world outside felt achingly real, bright stars blinking above them like witnesses to their escape.
"Mom, are we safe?" Max gasped, pushing himself up.
His little face was flushed with fear, and his voice trembled with uncertainty. Jessica brushed grass off her hair and grabbed his hand tightly.
"We will be, but we need to get away from here."
They stumbled to their feet, glancing back at the school. Its jagged silhouette loomed menacingly under the moonlight.
The shadows whispered secrets they were desperate to forget.
"Where do we go?" Max breathed, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting the terrifying figures from inside the school to emerge from the shadows. She could feel the panic creeping back into her heart, but she steeled herself, forcing calmness.
"We just need to get to town.
We'll be safe there." Together, they dashed toward the tree line, the thrill of freedom mingled with the fear of what might still be watching them.
With each step, Jessica felt more empowered.
The darkness in the school had been fierce, but now, she realized that sometimes, the light shines brightest when it's chased away. As they reached the edge of the woods, a distant siren echoed through the night. Jessica's heart sank momentarily. What if it was too late? But then she remembered the glow of the object, pulsing with energy, a reminder that they were not powerless, not anymore. "We can do this," she whispered to herself and to Max, squeezing his hand.
"Just keep running."
They exited the trees and hit the main road, pounding against the asphalt, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. Jessica glanced at Max, determination filled her chest.
"I won't let anything happen to you, Max. I promise."
Her son nodded, his trust in her a warm anchor.
"Can we tell Dad?"
he asked, his eyes searching hers. "We will," she smiled, though she added silently that the truth may shatter the stability they own. Together, they face everything, but the thought of reopening old wounds haunted her. Still, she couldn't think like that now. They had to move forward. The sirens grew closer, and Jessica urged Max to keep going. A small silhouette appeared on the road ahead, and with it, a surge of hope washed over her.
A patrol car.
She waved her arms frantically, shouting for help. As the officer stepped out, confusion and concern spread across his face.
"What's going on?"
he asked, quickly rushing toward them.
"We need help. There are people there after us," Jessica exclaimed, her voice trembling but relentless.
The officer's expression shifted from surprise to recognition. "You're Jessica Clark.
I've heard reports about what's happening in town."
Her heart raced faster.
"You have to listen." "The government, no, I don't want to hear it right now."
"We need to get you out of here," he interrupted, ushering them toward the patrol car, but Jessica wasn't done yet.
"You need to know it's not just about us. The disappearances, the government is behind it."
"I'll have my partner look into it, but first, we need to get you safe. You're both in danger." With that, he opened the back door of the patrol car, and Jessica helped Max inside.
After the door slammed shut, she took a deep breath and sank into the seat. "You're safe now," the officer reassured them.
As they drove away, her heart slowly began to untwist from its tight coil of fear. Behind them, the school faded into the distance, the nightmares tucked away inside its walls.
But the questions remained: what would happen next? Would they uncover the truth?
And as they drove ahead, Jessica realized that the fight was far from over. They had a story to tell, a fate to uncover about the townsfolk who vanished and the shadows that threatened their lives. Perhaps this was just the beginning. She squared her shoulders and watched the road ahead, the lights of the town shimmering like stars.
Reborn.
They would face whatever lay ahead, together. As the car continued down the road, she turned to Max, smiling deeply. "We'll figure this out, I promise.
No more running this time, we're fighting." Time stretched before them, full of possibility and peril.
Between them lay the hope of truth and a promise that, no matter how dark the night seemed, they'd never face it alone. And, finally, they felt the pulse of courage thrumming within their hearts, a light that could never be extinguished now. Don't miss the chance. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that are coming your way.
Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep us going. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending.
And, please, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.
Don't wait even one more second to share. Your support is everything.